Tonight, leave the noise of the modern world behind. Take a slow, gentle breath and allow your mind to wander into a story created simply to bring a little peace to your evening. This is an original fictional story created for relaxation and peaceful storytelling. While inspired by real places, cultures, and history, the characters and events are entirely fictional. Now, if you're comfortable, close your eyes, relax, and let the journey begin. 1887. The world was changing. Steamships crossed the great oceans, railways stretched across continents. New cities appeared where quiet fields had once stood, and little by little, the empty spaces on the world's maps began to disappear. Yet, far beyond the reach of scholars, beyond the routes marked in careful ink, there were still places that refused to become ordinary. Places that were spoken of only in whispers, not because they had never been seen, but because no two travelers ever described them the same way. High above the Andes Mountains, where the clouds drifted like slow rivers across the sky, the old shepherds spoke of one such place, a forgotten temple, hidden somewhere beyond the clouds, not filled with treasure, not guarded by monsters, but protected by silence itself. Most people dismissed the story. Some laughed, others called it a mountain legend invented to entertain curious strangers. The shepherds never argued. They simply smiled, looked toward the mountains, and continued with their work. Thousands of miles away, in the quiet heart of London, a young cartographer named Elias Whitmore spent his days drawing maps. His office overlooked a narrow street where horses pulled carriages across wet stone roads, and chimney smoke drifted lazily through the evening air. Every morning, he unfolded fresh sheets of paper. Every afternoon, he traced rivers, mountain ranges, ancient trade routes, and forgotten villages with remarkable precision. People admired his work. Explorers trusted his maps. Scholars praised his attention to detail. Many believed there was no place on earth Elias could not understand. But they never noticed the silence that followed him home each evening. Years earlier, his father, Edward Whitmore, had vanished during an expedition somewhere in South America. No final letter ever arrived. No companion returned with answers. Only questions crossed the ocean. At first, Elias waited. Then he searched. Eventually, he accepted that some journeys never truly ended. Yet every time he unfolded a map, his eyes wandered toward the blank spaces, toward the mountains that no one seemed eager to explore. Sometimes, late at night, he found himself wondering whether he had become a cartographer simply because he hoped one forgotten path might someday lead him back to his father. In the spring of 1887, a letter arrived from Peru. A local survey required an experienced mapmaker to document remote valleys near the Andes. Most cartographers politely declined. The journey was long, the weather unpredictable. The payment, far from generous. Elias accepted, without hesitation. He told himself it was only another assignment, Another mountain, another collection of measurements. But somewhere beneath that careful reasoning, a quieter voice suggested otherwise. Perhaps not every journey could be measured with ink and paper. Weeks later, after crossing the Atlantic, sailing along the coast of South America, and climbing steadily into the mountains, Elias reached a small village, hidden beneath towering peaks. The air felt astonishingly clear. Every breath carried the scent of pine, cold stone, and distant waterfalls. Children laughed softly along narrow paths. Women wove colorful blankets outside their homes. Old men quietly repaired wooden fences, while llamas wandered peacefully across nearby hills. Nothing seemed extraordinary, yet everything felt untouched by hurry, as though time itself moved more slowly among these mountains. That evening, as golden light slowly faded from the peaks, an elderly shepherd sat beside Elias near a small fire. For several minutes, neither man spoke. Only the wind moved gently through the valley. At last, the old shepherd looked toward the mountains. "There is a temple," he said quietly. "It waits above the clouds." Elias smiled politely, assuming he was listening to another village legend. The shepherd did not smile back. Instead, he looked directly into the young cartographer's eyes. "You will never find it with a map." He paused, as though choosing each word with great care. "Only a heart that has truly lost something will ever find the way." The fire burned quietly. Above the sleeping valley, the clouds gathered around the highest peaks, and for reasons he could not explain, Elias found himself unable to look away. The following morning, Elias awoke before the first light touched the mountains. The village was still asleep. Only a few lanterns glowed faintly inside distant homes. The air felt colder than the evening before. Thin clouds drifted silently through the valley, as though the mountains themselves were breathing. For several minutes, he remained outside his small wooden cabin, watching, listening, thinking about the old shepherd's words. "You will never find it with a map." The sentence lingered inside his mind. It seemed strangely impossible. Everything Elias had ever believed had been built upon maps. Every expedition, every successful journey, every great discovery had begun with careful measurements and accurate directions. Without them, people became lost. Yet the old shepherd had spoken with absolute certainty, as though there existed another kind of path, invisible to ink and paper. After breakfast, Elias carefully unfolded his maps across a rough wooden table. The surrounding mountains appeared exactly as they should. Every valley, every river, every known trail. Everything had been measured, documented, and drawn with remarkable precision. There was no hidden temple, no mysterious road leading above the clouds. Nothing unusual, only empty wilderness. He studied the pages again, searching for some forgotten detail. Perhaps an old trail, perhaps an abandoned staircase, anything. But every answer the maps offered only deepened the mystery. Near midday, the elderly shepherd quietly approached. Without asking permission, he sat beside Elias. His weathered hands rested gently upon his walking stick. "You are searching," he said softly, "for something that does not wish to be found." Elias looked up. "I only believe what can be measured." The old man nodded. "I once believed the same." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Only the distant sound of water echoed somewhere beyond the trees. Then the shepherd reached into a small leather pouch and placed a smooth gray stone upon the table. It was completely ordinary, no strange markings, no precious jewels, just a simple stone, worn smooth by countless years. "My grandfather carried this," the shepherd whispered. "So did his father. They all searched for the temple." Elias carefully examined the stone. "It tells you where to go?" The old man smiled. "No. It reminds you why you are walking." That afternoon, Elias left the village, not because he believed the shepherd's story, but because something inside him refused to ignore it. His backpack felt reassuringly familiar. Inside were carefully folded maps, a brass compass, a leather journal, food, water, and the instruments every experienced explorer trusted. He walked along an ancient Inca trail, barely visible beneath soft green moss. Tall cedar trees surrounded the narrow path. Their branches reached high into drifting clouds, allowing only scattered rays of sunlight to touch the forest floor. Birdsong echoed softly above him. Somewhere nearby, water rushed over hidden rocks. Every sound felt strangely gentle, as though the mountains welcomed silence more than conversation. Hours passed. The trail climbed steadily upward. The air became thinner, cooler, cleaner. Looking back, Elias could barely see the village below. Tiny rooftops rested quietly beneath a sea of white clouds. For the first time, he understood why travelers often believed the mountains belonged to another world. Everything familiar seemed impossibly far away. Late in the afternoon, the path divided into two narrow trails. One continued clearly toward a distant mountain pass. The other almost disappeared beneath thick grass and fallen leaves. Instinctively, Elias reached for his compass. It pointed confidently toward the marked route, the safe route, the logical route. Yet, for reasons he could not explain, his eyes remained fixed upon the forgotten path. No footprints marked its surface. No broken branches suggested recent travelers. Only quietness, waiting. The wind moved gently through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of wildflowers. For a brief moment, everything around him became perfectly still. Even the birds fell silent. Elias slowly folded his compass, placed it back inside his bag, looked once toward the familiar road, then quietly stepped onto the forgotten trail. Far above, hidden beyond drifting clouds, something seemed to be waiting. The forgotten trail felt different from the very first step. It was narrower, quieter, almost as though it had been waiting for someone to remember it. Thick moss covered the ancient stones beneath Elias's boots. Wild ferns leaned gently across the path, as if trying to hide it from passing eyes. Every few minutes, he glanced behind him. The familiar trail had already disappeared. Only trees and drifting mist remained. For the first time, a strange thought crossed his mind. Perhaps the mountain did not want to be followed. Perhaps it wanted to choose. The afternoon passed slowly. The higher Elias climbed, the quieter the world became. Even the birds were growing silent. Only the steady rhythm of his footsteps and the distant sound of water kept him company. Occasionally, the clouds parted, allowing brief glimpses of endless valleys stretching far below. Villages appeared, no larger than scattered pebbles. Rivers shimmered like silver threads. Everything seemed unbelievably small. He suddenly understood why the shepherds rarely left these mountains. After standing above the clouds, the rest of the world must feel very far away. As the sun slowly drifted toward the western horizon, the trail led him into an ancient forest. The trees were unlike anything he had seen before. Their trunks were enormous, their roots twisted across the ground like the backs of sleeping giants. Soft green moss covered every surface. Even the air seemed older. He stopped to write inside his journal. The forest feels strangely alive, not dangerous, only watchful. He smiled quietly. The sentence surprised him. A week earlier, he would have laughed at anyone describing a forest that way. Now, he found himself writing those very words. A gentle breeze passed through the branches. The leaves responded like distant whispers. For a brief moment, Elias closed his notebook and simply listened. He could not understand the sound, yet it carried an unexpected peace. Not excitement, not fear, only stillness. The kind of stillness he had not felt since childhood. Before ambition, before responsibility, before maps became his entire world. As darkness approached, he noticed something unusual. Along the side of the trail, half hidden beneath ivy, stood a small stone marker. Its surface had been worn smooth by countless years of rain. Only one carving remained visible. A spiral, simple, elegant, almost forgotten. He knelt beside it, running his fingers gently across the stone. It was warm, warmer than the cold mountain air should have allowed. He looked around. No houses, no temples, no signs of anyone living nearby. Only silence. The marker seemed completely alone, as though it had been placed there long ago for someone who had not yet arrived. Night settled gently over the mountains. The sky slowly transformed into a deep ocean of stars. Without city lights, the heavens appeared endless. The Milky Way stretched overhead like an ancient river flowing across eternity. Elias built a small fire beside a narrow stream. He prepared a simple meal: bread, cheese, fresh mountain water. Nothing more. Yet somehow it tasted better than the finest dinners he remembered from London. Perhaps, he thought quietly, peace had its own flavor. Before sleeping, he removed the small gray stone the shepherd had given him. Turning it slowly inside his hand, he wondered why generations of men had carried something so ordinary. There was no magic, no glowing symbols, no mysterious power, only a smooth stone. Yet somehow, holding it made him feel less alone. He placed it beside his journal and looked once more toward the unseen mountains. Somewhere, beyond the darkness, beyond the clouds, the temple might truly exist. Or perhaps it existed only inside the hearts of those who needed hope. For the first time, Elias realized he no longer cared which answer was true. The journey itself was already changing him. And high above, hidden behind the drifting clouds, a single, faint, golden light appeared for only a heartbeat before disappearing into the silent night. Morning arrived without a sunrise. The clouds had climbed higher during the night. They surrounded the forest like a silent ocean. Every tree appeared only as a shadow. Every step vanished almost immediately into white mist. Elias packed his belongings, carefully placed the small gray stone inside his coat, and continued climbing. There was no sound, except the quiet rhythm of his own footsteps. Even the stream that had rested beside him through the night had disappeared somewhere below. For the first time, the mountain felt completely empty. And yet, he could not shake the feeling that he was no longer walking alone. Hours passed. The trail became steeper. Ancient stone steps appeared beneath layers of moss, each one carefully carved by hands long forgotten. Nature had almost reclaimed them. Small flowers bloomed between the cracks. Tiny waterfalls crossed the staircase before disappearing beneath loose stones. Elias stopped often, not because he was exhausted, but because the beauty around him demanded silence. Every corner felt like the entrance to another century. Near midday, the mist began to thin. For only a few moments, the clouds opened. Far ahead, on a narrow cliff, an old man sat perfectly still. He wore simple woolen robes. His long white hair moved gently with the wind. Beside him rested a wooden walking staff. Nothing else. No shelter, no fire, no food, only the endless mountains. Elias approached slowly. The old man never turned around. Instead, he quietly asked, "What are you searching for?" The question caught Elias completely by surprise. He answered honestly, I don't know anymore. The old man smiled. That is a better answer than most. They remained silent, watching the clouds drift below them. Minutes passed, perhaps longer. Time felt strangely unimportant. Finally, the old man spoke again. Most people come here searching for something they believe will change their lives. Gold, power, secrets. They always leave disappointed. Elias looked toward him. And the temple? The old man chuckled softly. The temple never promised any of those things. Without another word, the old man stood. He began walking toward an almost invisible trail hidden behind the cliff. Elias followed. Neither of them spoke. They climbed together for what felt like hours. Sometimes the path became so narrow that only one person could pass. Sometimes it disappeared completely beneath drifting clouds. Yet the old man never hesitated. He walked as though every stone already knew his footsteps. Late in the afternoon, they reached a small plateau. There, growing alone, stood a single ancient cedar tree. Its branches spread wide across the mountain. Its roots wrapped themselves around enormous stones, like gentle hands. The old man stopped. This tree, he whispered, has watched travelers for longer than any living person. Elias stepped closer. The bark was covered with hundreds of tiny carvings. Not names, not dates, simple symbols, circles, spirals, mountains, stars. The old man noticed his curiosity. Every traveler leaves behind a single mark, not to remember the mountain, but to remember who they became while climbing it. For a long moment, Elias simply stood there. His hand rested gently against the ancient tree. The wood felt warm, just like the small gray stone. An unexpected memory suddenly returned. His father, smiling quietly while teaching him to read his very first map. Never believe the map is the journey. It only points in the right direction. The memory disappeared as gently as it had arrived. Yet something inside Elias shifted. For years he had searched for answers. Perhaps his father had never intended to leave him answers at all, only a direction. The wind grew stronger. Clouds gathered once more around the mountain. The old man looked toward the fading sky. It will rain tonight. We should keep moving. Elias nodded quietly. Before leaving, he removed a small pocket knife. Carefully, respectfully, he carved a single spiral into the ancient cedar. Nothing more. No name, no date. Only one simple mark. As they disappeared back into the mist, the old man smiled. You've stopped looking for the temple? Elias thought carefully, then answered, Yes. I think I'm finally looking for myself. The rain arrived shortly after sunset. not as a storm, but as a soft curtain falling quietly across the mountains. Each drop disappeared into the ancient forest without a sound. The old man walked steadily ahead. His pace never changed. Elias followed closely, carefully placing each step where the old man had stepped before. It felt as though he were walking not through rain, but through memory itself. Hours passed. Darkness covered the mountains completely. Only a small lantern hung from the old man's walking staff. Its warm golden light barely reached beyond a few steps. Everything else belonged to the night. Occasionally, a distant owl broke the silence. Then, everything became still once again. Elias had never known silence could possess so many different voices. Just before midnight, the rain slowly stopped. The clouds began to separate. Moonlight spilled gently across the mountain. For the first time, Elias noticed that the ancient trail had become something else. The rough stone steps were now perfectly shaped. The walls on either side had been carved with remarkable precision. Small symbols appeared everywhere. The same spirals, the same stars, the same circles he had seen on the ancient cedar tree. Nothing seemed accidental. Everything appeared exactly where it belonged. The old man stopped beside a narrow archway carved directly into the mountain. He quietly lifted his lantern. "Beyond this point," he whispered, "every traveler walks alone." Elias looked at him. "Aren't you coming?" The old man smiled gently. "My journey ended long ago. Yours is only beginning." For several moments, neither of them spoke. Then, the old man quietly stepped backward, disappearing once again into the drifting mist. Elias stood alone, the lantern still glowing softly in his hands. Taking a slow breath, he crossed beneath the ancient arch. Immediately, everything changed. The air felt warmer. The wind completely disappeared. Even the mountains seemed strangely distant. The narrow passage opened gradually into an enormous stone terrace. Elias stopped, unable to move. Far before him, above the sea of clouds, stood an entire forgotten city, not ruined, not abandoned, simply sleeping. Moonlight rested gently upon smooth white stone. Ancient staircases connected silent courtyards. Tall columns reached toward the stars. Small gardens overflowed with flowers, growing impossibly high above the earth. Everything was perfectly still. Not empty, not lifeless, only waiting. There were no guards, no gates, no voices, only the quiet sound of mountain wind passing gently through ancient pillars. Elias walked slowly across the great stone courtyard. His footsteps echoed softly, as though the city itself had heard his arrival. In the center stood a shallow pool, Its water reflected the stars with impossible clarity. Looking down, Elias expected to see his own reflection. Instead, he saw a much younger version of himself. A boy standing beside his father, holding his very first map. The vision lasted only a heartbeat. Then, the water became still once more. Elias closed his eyes, not frightened, only overwhelmed. He continued walking. Every building, every pathway, every stone carried the quiet beauty of something created without hurry. There was no gold, no throne, no treasure, nothing the outside world would have considered valuable. Yet, standing there above the clouds, Elias understood why people searched for this place across generations. It offered something far more difficult to find: silence. The kind of silence that slowly healed everything you had spent years trying to outrun. Far above, the stars continued shining, and somewhere, deep within, Elias quietly realized he had finally arrived exactly where he was always meant to be. The city remained perfectly silent. Not a single door opened. Not a single voice echoed through its ancient streets. Yet, Elias never felt alone. It was as though the city itself had become his companion. Every pathway seemed to guide him without directions. Every staircase led naturally toward the center. Without realizing it, he stopped looking for where to go. He simply walked. Beyond the quiet gardens, the city slowly revealed its greatest structure. An enormous circular temple rose gently above the surrounding buildings. Its marble columns glowed beneath the moonlight. Unlike the temples Elias had seen in books, there were no statues of kings, no monuments to victory, no displays of wealth. Only an open doorway, waiting. He climbed the final steps, slowly, respectfully. Inside, the temple felt even quieter than the city beyond. The roof opened toward the heavens. Moonlight poured softly into the center, like liquid silver. There, upon a single stone pedestal, rested nothing. No crown, no relic, no sacred book, only an empty circle carved into smooth white stone. Elias stared, unable to understand. For years, travelers had crossed continents searching for this place. Generations had whispered its name. Yet there was nothing. He laughed quietly, not with disappointment, but with wonder. Perhaps that had always been the lesson. Perhaps people traveled across the world expecting to find something, when the real gift was becoming someone else. He slowly sat beside the empty pedestal, closing his eyes for the very first time in many years. He stopped thinking about maps, about discoveries, about unfinished questions, about his father. He simply breathed. The silence did not feel empty. It felt complete. Minutes passed, perhaps hours. Time no longer mattered. Then, a familiar voice softly appeared inside his memory. Not as an echo, not as a dream. His father's voice, calm, warm, gentle. Every map shows the world, but very few show the traveler who is holding it. Elias smiled. A single tear quietly rolled down his face, not from sadness, but from relief. For the first time, he understood his father had never been trying to teach him how to find places. He had been trying to teach him how to find peace. The moon continued its slow journey across the night sky. Outside, the clouds drifted silently below the city. Elias remained seated, watching, listening, feeling as though the mountain had quietly removed a weight he had carried for half his life. At dawn, the first rays of sunlight touched the temple. The marble columns began glowing with warm golden light. The city slowly awakened, not with voices, but with birdsong, gentle mountain wind, and the scent of fresh wildflowers. For the first time since arriving, Elias noticed a narrow stone doorway behind the pedestal. It had not been there the night before, or perhaps he simply had not been ready to see it. Beyond that doorway, a single path led farther upward, toward the highest point of the mountain. Elias stood quietly, his heart calmer than ever before. Somewhere ahead, he knew the final answer was waiting, and with one slow breath, he stepped forward into the morning light. The narrow path led Elias to the highest point of the mountain. The wind returned gently. The clouds flowed quietly beneath his feet. The entire world lay below him. Valleys, rivers, forests, villages. Everything seemed impossibly small. Yet, for the first time, he did not feel above the world. He simply felt part of it. At the end of the path stood a single stone platform. Nothing more. No throne, no altar, no sacred treasure. Only one ancient inscription carved into white stone. The letters had survived centuries without fading. Elias stepped closer. Slowly, he read the words. The greatest journey is not across the world, but back to yourself. The mountain offered no explanation. It never claimed to possess wisdom. It simply waited until each traveler discovered their own. The small gray stone still rested inside Elias's pocket. He removed it gently, turning it once in the morning light. Then, without hesitation, he placed it upon the empty platform. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Only silence, only wind, only clouds drifting endlessly below. Then, a warm breeze passed quietly across the summit. The stone did not glow. The mountain did not tremble. There was no miracle, only an overwhelming feeling that something inside him had finally come home. Elias remained there until the sun climbed high above the mountains. He never searched for another hidden chamber. He never looked for secret passages. There was nothing left to discover. The temple had already given him everything he had unknowingly come to find. Not answers, not certainty, not proof, only peace. And somehow, peace was enough. The journey down felt completely different. The trails had not changed. The forests were exactly the same. The rivers still sang quietly beside the rocks. Yet, everything looked new. Not because the mountain had changed, because he had. When he reached the ancient cedar tree, he quietly touched the small spiral he had carved. The mark no longer felt like a promise. It felt like gratitude. Days later, Elias returned to the small village. The old shepherd was waiting, as though he had known exactly when Elias would arrive. They smiled without speaking. No questions were asked. No explanations were needed. The shepherd noticed the empty place inside Elias's coat, where the small stone had once rested. He simply nodded. "You left it." Elias smiled softly. "It was never mine." The old man looked toward the mountains. "It never was." Several months later, Elias returned to London. His maps were still admired. His work remained respected. But something had quietly changed. When explorers asked him to mark the temple above the clouds upon their maps, he always smiled and gently refused. "There are places," he would say, "that cannot be found by following someone else's path." Years passed. His hair turned silver. His hands became slower. But every evening, before closing his journal, he looked toward a small empty space upon his bookshelf, exactly where the gray stone might have rested. He never regretted leaving it behind, because the mountain had already placed something far more valuable inside him. Near the end of his life, Elias wrote one final entry. "I believed I was searching for a hidden temple above the clouds, but the mountain never wished to show me a place. It wished to remind me who I had always been. I climbed to find a forgotten temple, and in the end, I found myself." Even today, when the morning clouds drift gently across the high Andes, the old shepherds still smile quietly toward the mountains. Some journeys, they say, begin with a map, but the rarest ones begin with a heart ready to come home.